Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. This episode is brought to you by Setting Advice. I'm Joyce, a financial advisor. Also with me today is my fellow advisor, Lance.
Morning.
So this is the second video of Retirement Planning Your 60s mini series. And the topic we want to talk about here is term deposit and the purchasing power of your money.
Yes, Joyce, 1 year term deposit rates are now over 4%. I guess it's a lot better than what it has been over the last 3 years. Look, investors are now asking financial advisors, should I keep my money in a term deposit? What are your thoughts on this?
That's a great question, Lance. We are certainly getting that question from investors more often now. And I think it's natural to feel that way. Term deposit is getting back to a more normal level they have averaged over the last 10 to 20 years. And it's great for savers that's finally generating a higher income, right? And particularly so in a year, we've seen a broad-based decline of asset prices. And keeping your money in term deposit is probably the winning strategy. You would have outperformed majority of investors this year. Although I can't really tell you if you should continue to keep your money in term deposit because I don't know your personal circumstances or which particular asset class will do well over the coming year because I don't know. Let's just backtrack that a bit and talk about the concept of real return on your money. That's basically the purchasing power. So when we save and invest, we are sacrificing today's joy for tomorrow's enjoyment. So there's no point in making that sacrifice as your money is not going to buy you the same amount of goods and service into the future, right? That is the minimum. And for most of us, we want more. And the biggest enemy of achieving that is inflation. Everybody hears about it this year. It's all over the newspaper headline. So if we analyze that in terms of a term deposit rate, we've got most of banks offer on term deposit rate in front of you. If you put your money in a term deposit for 1 year, at the moment, you're getting about 5% before tax. On a 30% tax rate, that's about 3.5% after tax. And inflation is running at 7.2% annually over the September quarter. That's the price is more expensive comparing to September last year by more than 7.2%. So, you earn a bit, but the spending power of money actually reduced more quickly than the interest payment that you are getting. It's an analogy that I would use is like filling up water with a leaky bucket, right? It's pretty obvious the return is negative and the money is actually going backwards.
Good point, Joyce. I get what you're saying about money losing purchasing power when inflation's actually sitting at a 32-year high at the moment, as you say, of over 7%. It's an extraordinary environment, I guess, that we're going through, and we hope that central banks can get their tools working and get inflation down in the next 12 months or so. Maybe inflation's peaked. But how do term deposits normally fare in a normal environment, in a normal interest rate environment?
Yeah, that's a great question because, we at Saturn certainly don't believe that inflation, it's sustainable for inflation to keep at this level. So it makes sense to looking back to the history and analyze using a more normalized inflation environment. So let's look at some example here, right? So I got them from Reserve Bank New Zealand website. To start off, let me explain inflation a bit better. So CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, is a measure of inflation in New Zealand. And it's calculated based on price change on a fixed basket of goods and services. No one buys everything from that basket. So your experience and your impact, how you are impacted from inflation is highly personable. Now, let's just look at the basket as a starting point. That's your general CPI. Over the last 20 years, I use the period from 2000 to 2020. That's cutting out the post-COVID extraordinary environment. We can see that over the last 20 years, the compounded average inflation is about 2%. So that means over the 20-year period, the money has experienced a 33% reduction in purchasing power. And that's inflation being the silent thief, right? If you've not grown your money over 20 years, your money actually lose 33% of purchasing power. Now, if you think about going back to term deposit, if you religiously manage your term deposit over that 20-year period, you probably on par with general inflation after tax. So we mentioned earlier that the impact on you personally depends on the mixture of goods and services that you consume on a day-to-day basis. So let's look at food, because food is an item, a necessity for everybody, particularly for retirees. Over the last 20 years, the food inflation has averaged about 2.2% per annum. What that means is, think about it this way. In 2000, you go into supermarket and you fill up your trolley and it costs $100. In 2020 Q4, you buy same bucket, same trolley of goods, that's going to cost you $155.30. And then and for you individually, for the audience out there, you start thinking about other goods and services that you consume, right? So you think about the increase. If you are a property owner, you think about the increase in your cost of council rates and house insurance, the cost of medical insurance, or any other item that you spend money on. Then you can reflect and review your own experience of inflation. So if your overall cost has gone up more than the general inflation, then your term deposit money has actually gone backwards. Now let's go a step further. I want to actually talk about salary inflation, which has a much bigger impact on retiree, and you probably wonder why I'm not even getting that salary. Over the last 20 years, the salary inflation in New Zealand has been on average 3.3% per annum. Although we never feel like we have enough, but to a certain extent, it isolate you from rising costs of, insulate you from rising costs of living. For majority of us earning a salary to come out ahead of general inflation. That become particularly challenging for retirees because you are no longer getting that paycheck. You do have New Zealand Super, which is wage inflation adjusted, but it doesn't cover all your costs, like the Massey University guideline that Lance, you talked us through earlier. On average, people get about 25,000 for a single person. They get 25,000 per annum. That's not enough to cover all your expenses. So there is a gap. You need to top it up with other financial assets. And if your chosen financial asset is term deposit, over the last 20 years, it did not give you the same kind of growth you would have had if you were receiving a paycheck. This means as a retiree, you will need to make adjustment to your lifestyle, potentially cutting back. And when we've done the hard yards to save, don't we want more in retirement, not less? So I think it's really important to not think about returning just absolute terms. I'm getting 4%, 5%, rather in the term of purchasing power. You want to gain more purchasing power, not less over time. So you should really choose the financial asset that suits you, and taking some risk will help you get ahead.